What's up, everyone? Today we're talking about the closest humanity has ever come to total annihilation. And I'm not exaggerating. The story I'm about to tell you was classified for over a decade. When it finally came out, military historians called it the most dangerous moment in human history. And it all came down to one guy, in a bunker, with the decision to make. Let's get into it. So picture this. It's September 1983. The Cold War is at its absolute peak. Just 3 weeks earlier, the Soviet Union shot down a Korean passenger plane. 269 people dead, including a U.S. congressman. Tensions between America and Russia? Through the roof. Both superpowers have thousands of nuclear weapons pointed at each other. Both are on what's called hair trigger alert. That means they're ready to launch everything within minutes if they detect an attack. Why? Because if you wait too long, the enemy's missiles destroy your missiles before you can fire back. So the whole system is built on one terrifying principle: use them or lose them. Now, the Soviets had this new early warning system. It uses satellites in orbit to detect missile launches from the U.S. And on the night of September 26th, this system is being monitored by a 44-year-old lieutenant colonel named Stanislav Petrov. You've probably never heard of him. Remember that name, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why he might be the most important person who ever lived. Now, before I tell you what happened in that bunker, you need to understand what would have happened if Petrov made the wrong choice. And to understand that, we need to talk about nuclear war for a second. And trust me, this is more insane than you think. Okay, so when we say nuclear war, what are we actually talking about? In 1983, the Soviet Union had about 40,000 nuclear warheads. The U.S. had about 24,000. One single warhead is powerful enough to level an entire city. If the Soviets detected a U.S. attack, their protocol was simple: launch everything before the American missiles hit and destroy their ability to retaliate. Same thing for the U.S. If Soviet missiles were detected, American forces had about 15 minutes to launch a full counterstrike. Scientists have run the models on what a full-scale nuclear exchange would look like. Within the first hour, every major city in North America, Europe, and the Soviet Union would be gone. We're talking 200 million people dead instantly. But that's just the beginning. The fires from burning cities would launch so much smoke into the atmosphere that it would block out the sun for years. Global temperatures would drop by 20 degrees Celsius. It's called nuclear winter. Crops would fail worldwide. Billions would starve. Most complex life on Earth would go extinct. Okay, so that's what's at stake. Keep that in your head. Now let's go back to that bunker. September 26, 1983, just after midnight. Stanislav Petrov is on duty at Serpukhov 15, a secret bunker south of Moscow. This is the nerve center of the Soviet early warning system. If American missiles launch, Petrov sees it first. And then the alarms start screaming. On his screen, red letters flash: launch, launch, launch. The computer is crystal clear. The United States has just launched a nuclear missile at the Soviet Union. Petrov's heart is racing. His staff is looking at him. What do you do? Protocol says, pick up the red phone, call the Kremlin, report the attack immediately. But then, something even worse happens. The system detects a second missile, then a third, then a fourth, then a fifth. 5 intercontinental ballistic missiles headed for Soviet territory. Now here's where it gets interesting, and this is where Petrov's training should have kicked in. His job wasn't to decide if it was real. His job was to report it. Let the generals and the Soviet leadership make the call. And Petrov knew that if he picked up that phone, the Soviet Union would launch everything. In minutes, thousands of missiles would be in the air, the U.S. would detect them and launch their own. And that would be it. Game over for humanity. Everything depended on what Petrov did in the next 60 seconds. So why didn't he pick up the phone? Well, that's where the story gets even crazier. Because Petrov noticed something that didn't make sense. Okay, so Petrov is staring at this screen. 5 missiles detected. His staff is yelling. The alarms are going off. And Petrov is thinking. His training told him that any U.S. first strike would be massive. Hundreds of missiles, maybe thousands. The whole point of a first strike is to overwhelm defenses and destroy the enemy's ability to fight back. 5 missiles? That makes no strategic sense. Also, this satellite system? Brand new. Barely tested. Lots of malfunctions in the first few weeks. And here's the kicker. Soviet ground radar showed nothing. No missiles, no confirmation. The satellites said attack. The radar said nothing. So, Petrov made a call. He told his staff it was a false alarm. He didn't pick up the phone. He later said, "I had a funny feeling in my gut. I didn't want to be the one responsible for starting World War III." And he was right. 20 minutes later, it became clear what happened. The satellites had mistaken sunlight reflecting off clouds for missile launches. A rare alignment in the orbit, a glitch. No missiles were coming. No attack had been launched. If Petrov had followed protocol, he would have reported the attack. Soviet leadership would have ordered a counterstrike. The U.S. would have seen Soviet missiles launching and fired everything they had. Billions would have died. All because of sunlight and one man's gut feeling. So, you'd think Petrov would be a hero, right? Nope. He got called in for intense questioning. The military was furious that he didn't follow protocol. They didn't care that he was right. They cared that he broke the rules. He was quietly reassigned. No medal, no recognition. For years, the story stayed classified. The world didn't find out about Petrov until the late 1990s, when a researcher stumbled onto a reference to the incident in old Soviet documents. When reporters tracked Petrov down, he was living in a tiny apartment outside Moscow, surviving on a small pension. He didn't think he was a hero. He told them, "I was just doing my job. I was in the right place at the right time." Stanislav Petrov died in May 2017. He was 77 years old. His death went unnoticed for months. Most of the world never knew his name. But every September 26th, a small group of people celebrate Petrov Day, honoring the man who saved humanity by trusting his gut. So here's the crazy part. This wasn't the only time this happened. In fact, Petrov's decision in 1983 wasn't even the closest we came to nuclear war. There was another incident. October 27, 1962, Cuban Missile Crisis. A Soviet submarine surrounded by American warships, and on that submarine, a nuclear weapon. The captain wanted to use it, and he would have, except for one other guy who said no. That story, even more insane than this one. I'm going to cover it in the next video, so make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell because this series is going to blow your mind. What do you think? Could you make the call Petrov made, knowing that if you're wrong, everyone dies? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.